Welcome back to Inside Story on Al Jazeera America. I'm Ray Suarez. That's President Obama talking about negotiations with Iran currently underway, trying to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear power. As you heard earlier, the president's wondering what's the rush in Congress to vote on sanctions as the negotiations approach their agreed-upon deadline. We want to continue our conversation now on Prime Minister Netanyahu's upcoming speech to Congress with Morton Klein, president of the Zionist Organization of America, and Matt Duss, president of the Foundation for Middle East Peace. Mort Klein, welcome to the program. What does it tell us that the Prime Minister is insisting on going ahead with this speech, and is it a risky gambit for him?
This is an extremely serious issue, where Israel's very existence is threatened, where the Iranian leaders, Khamenei and Rouhani, have publicly and repeatedly called for the destruction of Israel and the murder of millions of Jews in Israel. Moreover, Khamenei himself has called for the destruction of America, and has called America Iran's #1 enemy, and called America an enemy who smiles, the great Satan. So we're both threatened, and America is going to be threatened very soon, even more than they are now, because the ICBMs they're developing will be able to reach America within a year. It is so serious that Congress has enacted legislation that protective elements in the east coast of America to protect themselves in case they do launch an ICBM nuclear strike against the United States. So this is a serious issue threatening Israel's existence and threatening the murder of millions of people around the world. That's why it's an imperative for Netanyahu to try to convince Congress and convince the American people and urge them to have a really solid deal where Iran cannot in any way develop nuclear weapons any time in the foreseeable future. That's why it's so critically important he accept this major podium and this major address on the Iran nuclear weapons issue.
If you look at the polls, one of the few things Americans agree on is that Israel should be safe and secure. Do you really think that the current administration in the White House is risking the future existence, future security of Israel?
Well, President Obama claims he will do everything in his power to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons. But it's rather strange that he doesn't want to hear one of the experts who was most in danger from Iran's weapons, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. He should want to meet with him. He should want to hear his message to try and see whether he has ideas to strengthen America's hand and to make sure a deal is strong. So the fact that he doesn't want Netanyahu to speak or even to meet with him, the fact that he has caved in on many issues up till now, allowing uranium to be enriched where they should have gotten rid of all uranium, allowing the centrifuges to remain in place, that's 20,000 of them, as opposed to destroying all of them, and to not even make an issue out of the intercontinental ballistic missiles, whose only purpose is to carry a nuclear payload. So I'm very worried about President Obama's seriousness about stopping Iran, especially now that he doesn't want Netanyahu to give his important thoughts on this issue. Is actually very frightening to me as an American citizen, who cares deeply about Israel.
Matt Duss, I'm going to stipulate that you're an American citizen who cares deeply about Israel as well, but you don't see this the same way, do you?
Well, I don't. First, I want to just make clear, this isn't really about just Netanyahu and Obama. This is about, Obama is not making these decisions alone. The United States is making these decisions. They are in negotiations with their partners in the P5+1. Those are the permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council plus Germany. So the idea that this is just the U.S. and Iran sitting down together, it's not. The U.S. has worked closely with its allies. They've maintained a united front. And in fact, President Obama and his administration have heard from Netanyahu and other members of the Israeli government and are hearing from them constantly. You will hear this from Israeli leaders all the time. I've heard it personally over the past several years, that the level of communication and coordination between the U.S. and Israel, specifically on this question of Iran, has never been better. So this idea that the president simply won't listen to what Netanyahu says, or more broadly, that the American people haven't heard what Netanyahu says, doesn't make much sense.
But implicit in a lot of the critique that's coming from Israel, and certainly from the current Israeli Prime Minister, is that we understand We don't think the United States understands that if you make a deal with Iran, we're in danger. Does the leadership circle in Israel believe that the United States is willing to risk Israel's security?
You know, I think what we have are two, between Netanyahu and his circle, and President Obama and his circle, and these two men, I think we need to recognize, speak for constituencies within their own countries, do have differing views of Iran, and more broadly, different views about the appropriate uses of power. But I don't think there's any serious doubt in Israel that the United States would somehow sell Israel out and make a deal with Iran that would endanger the existence of the state of Israel. I think Netanyahu himself and the people around him simply don't believe that any deal that leaves Iran with a nuclear program, with the ability to enrich uranium inside their own country, is a deal that Israel can live with. I think you can find people in Israel who don't agree with that view. But I think President Obama and our partners in the P5+1 have come to the conclusion that it's simply not a workable deal to demand that Iran give up its entire nuclear enrichment program. They've decided that a workable deal, one that puts Iran's nuclear program under heavy inspection and prevents an Iranian nuclear weapon in that way, is one that will allow some measure, some limited amount of domestic enrichment.
Mort Klein, you're in Vienna to meet with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Do you believe that that agency, which is tasked with doing this kind of work, can keep track of Iran's centrifuges?
They can keep track of what they're allowed to keep track of. But Iran continues to do research and development. It's permitted to improve the centrifuges to make it easier to develop a nuclear weapon. And there are military installations like Parchin, where experts believe nuclear work is going on, where monitors are not permitted to go and determine if anything's happening. And there's the Iraq plutonium plant, which is an alternative method to nuclear weapons, which continues full force. And by the way, 75% of Israelis in a very recent poll think that President Obama is not supportive of Israel. So the Israelis are very nervous about the American administration. But this is not only dangerous to America, to Israel. This is dangerous to us here in America, or there could be a serious threat. And also, what is the problem? Why is there a negative that President Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, speak to Congress with a major podium so the American people can hear and learn firsthand from an expert on this issue? Why is that a problem? Why is that a negative? I simply don't understand it. As Senator Menendez of New Jersey, a Democrat of New Jersey, a former chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said, when I hear President Obama speak, his talking points sound more like the talking points coming straight out of Iran than talking points from America.
Still ahead on Inside Story. Do Israelis believe that the United States is not looking out for them? In this current confrontation over a Netanyahu speech to a joint session of Congress, there's an embedded assumption that making a deal with Iran could put Israel in mortal danger, and President Obama is willing to risk that. And is the assertion that the United States is ready to gamble with Israel's security hurting the U.S.-Israeli relationship? Stay with us. It's Inside Story. We're back with Inside Story on Al Jazeera America. I'm Ray Suarez. Matt Duss of the Foundation for Middle East Peace and Mort Klein of the Zionist Organization of America are still with me. Matt Duss, my guest earlier in the program, rejected the comparison, but I'm going to try again. Could you imagine a circumstance where a president of the United States would address the Knesset without being invited by the Prime Minister?
No, I really couldn't. And with respect to the differences your earlier guest made, I do recognize that. But I do think we have to understand that this whole process was very much out of the ordinary. This was something that was cooked up by Netanyahu and his ambassador to the United States, Ron Dermer, with the Speaker of the House for several weeks. The administration found out about the invitation, I think, if not right before it was actually announced, then even as it was announced publicly. Netanyahu himself accepted the invitation later, but there's just no question that the administration was surprised by this invitation in a way that was very, very out of the ordinary.
Mort Klein, does it make any sense to, tick off one of the political parties of our two main parties in the United States?
Look, even the New York Times had a story saying that President Obama was informed of this speech and simply didn't respond. In the same way, in 2011, when Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke to Congress, Obama was informed and didn't respond then. And I can assure you, if the Knesset wanted the President of the United States to speak, there's no Prime Minister of Israel that ever, in any way, shape, or form, say no to that. And we have to understand, we're dealing with an Iran that is the biggest funder of terrorism in the world. They fund Hamas, Hezbollah. Rouhani, their president, was the mastermind behind the Khobar Towers massacre of 19 U.S. Marines. They have thousands of political prisoners. They've executed hundreds of gay people. There's virtually no women's rights. This is a terrorist regime, not that much different from Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And we certainly wouldn't be allowing Al-Qaeda and ISIS to keep uranium and maintain centrifuges.
Mort Klein, no one is pleading Iran's brief on this program. What I'm trying to get is an idea of whether it makes good sense for Israel to intrude on a debate in the United States Congress. The President, during the State of the Union address, asked the Congress not to move ahead with more sanctions until we get an outcome one way or another from these negotiations. Well, now the head of state of another country is coming and entering that debate. Is it a good idea? It's
a compelling, imperative need for Israel to let the American people know about what is at stake here when it comes to this nuclear weapons issue. And this isn't bizarre. President Obama says he'll veto a sanctions bill, which would only take place if there's no deal. It will not take place if there's a deal, and Obama does not have to implement it. He can choose not to implement it. Why would he say that he doesn't want sanctions if there's no deal? He's simply appeasing Iran, and many Democrats are very upset and very concerned about him. So no, this is a major podium, a serious danger that threatens America, the world, and Israel, and Prime Minister Netanyahu must take the advantage of this to try and urge the American people and Congress to be strong and tough and not allow Iranian nuclear weapons.
Matt Duss, if everybody sticks to their guns from this point out, what's the best that can be hoped for from this?
Well, the best that can be hoped for is, Netanyahu comes, and I think he will come, because as I see it, at this point, his ability to influence the debate has been severely diminished. The way this is kind of, at this point, it's becoming a bit counterproductive, and he's even receiving serious criticism in Israel for the way he's been dealing with this. But at this point, I think it's important for him. Let's remember the Israeli elections are March 17, about 2 weeks after the speech. It's very important for his base, and this is something that his own political base values, is that he's seen as someone who can resist pressure. He's getting a lot of criticism, and he goes forward anyway and kind of pleads Israel's case on the international stage. Where we go after that, it remains to be seen. Obviously, the outcome of the Israeli elections matter. I don't think that will be in any way determinative of how the United States moves forward on the Iran issue. As I said, I think this is not the United States making these decisions. I think it's the United States in close consultation with its allies.
But does Prime Minister Netanyahu also risk tinkering with the mechanics of a long tradition in Israeli-U.S. relations of bipartisan support for Israel?
Well, I think the fundamentals of the U.S.-Israel relationship will not really change. I think that relationship is deep. The relations at the military, the security, the intelligence level, certainly the political level, are deep and strong. But I think there's really no question that this stunt between Boehner and Netanyahu together has really opened up some very serious fissures, particularly on the Democratic side, not so much over support for Israel, but for the support of this one particular worldview represented by Netanyahu, something that's very hawkish, very aggressive, that is seen as very sort of offensive and putting a thumb in the eye of the United States president. And I think that's something that will not go away soon.
Matt Duss, Mort Klein, gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. That's all for this edition of Inside Story.